Hello, and welcome to Godly Play. I'm so glad you could join me. I wonder if we should let Mum and Dad join us for this Godly Play lesson. I think we should. Find yourself a nice, quiet, comfortable place before we start the story. Are you ready? In this time after the first Easter day, Jesus' friends were confused and frightened. But they began to see Jesus in a new way. On that first day, Mary and her friends went to the tomb where they'd laid Jesus. But when they got there, they found that the stone had been rolled away. And all they could see in the tomb was the linen cloth in which they'd wrapped Jesus' body. And as Mary stood there weeping, she saw someone whom she thought was the gardener, until he said, "Mary, why are you weeping?" And she knew who he was. When she tried to touch him, he was gone. Mary went back to the others and told them what she'd seen. Then sometime later, the disciples met together in a locked room because they were afraid. They were afraid they might be arrested too. And then in that darkened room, a voice said, "Peace be with you." When they looked at first, they didn't know who this was until they saw his wounds. And again he said, "Peace be with you." And then he was gone. Now, Thomas, one of the disciples, wasn't there that night. When the disciples told him the following day what had happened, he said, "I won't believe until I can touch his wounds." So some days later, they were meeting again in that locked room. And Thomas was with them. And a voice said, "Peace be with you." And went up to Thomas and said, "Touch me." Thomas fell to his knees and said, "My Lord and my God." And Jesus said, "You have seen and you have believed. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet believe." Two of Jesus' followers were walking on the road to a village called Emmaus, which is about 7 miles from Jerusalem. And they were shaking their heads and pondering of the things that had happened in Jerusalem. And as they were talking, a stranger came and walked along with them. And he asked them, what was it they were discussing? And they said, the events in Jerusalem in the last few days, the cross, the tomb. And the stranger said, what was this about? And the two men said, are you the only person in Jerusalem who doesn't know what has been happening? And the stranger said they were foolish, and reminded them what the scriptures, what the Bible had told them about the history of his people. How they'd been trapped in Egypt, and Moses had led them free. How they'd been trapped in the desert, and God had given Moses the commandments to guide them. How they'd been trapped in exile. And the prophets had said a child would lead them, and someone would have to come and suffer and die. It was coming to the end of the day, and they came to the village called Emmaus. And the two men were to stay at an inn, and they asked the stranger to come and stay with them. They sat down for supper. The stranger took the bread and blessed it, gave thanks, and gave it to them. And at that moment, they knew who he was. But he was gone. The two disciples talked about how they'd felt when Jesus spoke to them. And they went back to Jerusalem and told the others. I hope you enjoyed these stories of Jesus meeting with his friends and how their eyes were opened. You might like to talk to Mum and Dad and see what they thought. I wonder how they felt about the stories. I hope you can join us for more stories in Godly Play.